Hello, my name is Mayanka. I am the finance and the accounting trainer from Uplatz. Today we are covering the topic of TDS. TDS means tax deduct at source. What is the TDS? TDS is the part of the income tax. It is collected from the various source of incomes. The concept of the TDS is controlled by the Central Board of Direct Tax, is that CBDT. It is the revenue to the government. What is the TDS? The concept of the TDS was introduced by the central government with an aim to collect the amount of TDS from the various source of income. The various source of income means the amount of rent, commission, professional fees, the amount of royalty, and any other income. According to the concept of TDS, the person who is liable to make the payment to any other person, then such person shall deduct the amount of TDS from such payment, and the amount which is arise after deduction of TDS will be paid by such person to the recipient, and the amount of the TDS which is deducted by him will be created in the account of central government too. Is that the recipient of the income will be eligible to receive the net income, which will be the amount of income less the amount of TDS. The person whose amount of TDS has been deducted by the person will be eligible to take the credit of such amount of TDS. Such amount of TDS will be reflected in the 26AS or the TDS certificate which is issued by the deductor, and the person can download the 26AS from the site of income tax. For the example, Mr. A is paying the amount of rent to Mr. B. Then Mr. A is liable to deduct the amount of TDS from the amount of rent, and the balance amount will be paid by him to Mr. B, and the amount of TDS which is deducted by Mr. A will be deposited in the account of central government. Now we are discuss the sections of TDS. Number 8. Section 192, TDS on payment of salary. Section 192A, TDS on premature withdrawal from EPF. Section 193, TDS on interest on securities. Section 194, TDS on dividend other than the dividend which is referred in section 115O. Section 194A, TDS on income by way of interest other than interest on security. Because the TDS on interest on security is already covered in section 193. Section 194B, TDS on income which is earned by way of winnings from lottery, crossword puzzles, cards game, and any other games. Section 194DB, TDS on income which is earned by the way of winnings from horse race. Section 194C, TDS on payment to contractor oblique subcontractor. Section 194D, TDS on insurance commission. Section 194DA, TDS on payment in the respect of a life insurance policy. Section 194EE, TDS on payment in the respect of deposit under National Saving Scheme. Section 194F, TDS on payment on account of repurchase of a unit by mutual fund or by Union Trust of India. Section 194G, TDS on commission which is earned on the sale of lottery tickets. Section 194H, TDS on commission or brokerage. Section 194I, TDS on rent. Section 194IA, TDS on the payment on the transfer of certain immovable property other than any agricultural land. Section 194IB, TDS on rent which is payable by an individual or by an HUF which is not covered under Section 194I. Section 194IC, TDS on payment which is made under joint venture agreement to an individual or HUF. Section 194J, TDS on fees for professional services. Section 194K, TDS on the payment of any income in the respect of units of a mutual fund as per the Section 1023D or the unit from the administrator or units from a specified company. Section 194LA, TDS on payment of compensation on the acquisition of certain immovable property. Section 194LBA, TDS on certain income which is distributed by a business trust to its unit holder. Section 194LBB, TDS on certain income which is paid by an investment fund to its investor. Section 194LBC, TDS on income in the respect of investment in securitization funds. Section 194M, TDS on certain payment which is made by an individual or HUF. Section 194N, TDS on payment of certain amount in cash. Section 194O, TDS which is applicable for the e-commerce operator when the e-commerce operator sell any goods or make any services which is facilitated by them through its digital or electronic platform. Now, there is a residual section which is covered TDS on other incomes. Other incomes means the incomes which are not covered in above sections. So, now we will discuss section 192, TDS on salary. When the TDS section 192 is applicable, every person who is responsible for paying any amount oblique any income which is chargeable to tax under the head of salary, then the payer shall be liable to deduct the amount of TDS on such amount. Is that when there is any person who is liable to pay any amount to any other person and such amount of income is taxable under the head of salary of the recipient, then the payer shall deduct the amount of TDS and he shall deposit such amount of TDS to the government. And what is the rate of TDS? The TDS has to be calculated at the average rate of income tax, which is computed on the basis of the rates or the slab rates which are the relevant for the financial year in which the payment is made. Is that we will calculate the average rate which will be calculated by dividing the amount of income tax by the amount of total income. Is that the average rate is equal to amount of income tax divided by total income. Time of deduction of TDS under section 192. The liability to deduct the TDS in case when there is any payment of salary is that the person who is making the payment of the salary will deduct the amount of TDS at the time of payment. For the example, Mr. A, who is the employer of Mr. B. Then Mr. A is the person who is the responsible to pay the amount of salary to Mr. B. Then Mr. A will deduct the amount of TDS from the amount of salary which is paid by him to Mr. B. And the TDS will be calculated at the average rate, which will be calculated by dividing the amount of income tax by the total income of Mr. B. And the amount of TDS which is deducted by Mr. A will be deposited in the account of central government. In the case of section 192, there is a very important point is that the relationship of the employer and the employee is mandatory. Now, we will discuss the section 192A, TDS on premature withdrawal from EPF. Section 192A is applicable when there is any premature withdrawal from EPF, is that when there is any withdrawal from Employee Provident Fund, then the provision of section 192A will be applicable. Who will deduct the amount of TDS? Any person who is authorized under the scheme to make the payment of such accumulated balance to the employee are required to deduct the amount of TDS. Is that the person who is authorized to make the payment of such amount to the employee will deduct the amount of TDS and deposit such amount of TDS to the government. What is the rate of TDS? The rate of the TDS will be 10%. Time of deduction. The tax will be deducted by the payer at the time of payment of accumulated balance to the employee. Is that when there is any payment which is made by such authorized person, then he will deduct the amount of TDS from such payment. Non-applicability of section 192A. The provision of section 192A will not be applicable if the amount of such payment or the aggregate amount of such payment is less than rupees 50,000. Is that if there is any payment of premature withdrawal of EPF is less than the amount of 50,000, so then the provision of section 192A will not be applicable and there is no need to deduct the amount of TDS under section 192A. Deduction at maximum marginal rate in case of non-submission of PAN. Every person who is entitled to receive any amount on which the tax is deducted under section 192A, then such person is responsible to provide or furnish his PAN to the person who is responsible for deducting the tax. Is that the receiver shall be responsible to furnish his PAN to the person who will deduct the amount of TDS. In case if he fails to do so and he is not eligible to provide his PAN to the deductor, then the TDS would be deducted by the person at the maximum marginal rate. What is the maximum marginal rate? Maximum marginal rate means the rate of income tax which is applicable in the relation to the highest slab of the income in the case of individual, HUF, AOP and BOI. Is that it is the highest slab rate of the income. It is applicable only in the case when the person who is required to furnish the PAN and he fails to furnish his PAN, then the TDS will be deducted at the rate of maximum marginal rate. Now, we will discuss section 192A by the way of example. Mr. Ram, an employee of Messrs XYZ Limited from 15th April 2017. Now he wants to be resigned on 31st March 2021 and he withdraw 60,000 from his EPS account. As per the provision of section 192A, Mr. Ram has withdrawn an amount which is exceeding the amount of rupees 50,000 at the time of his resignation. Therefore, TDS has to be deducted at the rate of 10% under section 192A on total amount of 60,000, and such amount of TDS will be deducted at the time of payment. Then the net amount which is receivable by Mr. Ram will be the amount of income less the amount of TDS. It will be 54,000. 60,000 minus 6,000. Now we will discuss the section 193, interest on security. Applicability of section 193. Section 193 is applicable when any person who is responsible for paying an amount of income by the way of interest on security to a resident. Is that section 193 is applicable when there is any payment of income by the way of interest on security, or when such payment is made to a resident. What is the rate of TDS? The rate of the TDS will be at the rate 10%. Time of deduction of TDS. The TDS will be deducted at the time of credit of such income to the account of pay or the time of payment. Therefore, whether it is made in cash or by issue of a check or by any draft or by any other mode, whichever is earlier, is that the TDS will be deducted at the time of credit or at the time of payment, whichever is earlier. Non-applicability of section 193 is that when section 193 is not applicable, the provision of section 193 is not applicable. Number 8, any interest which is payable on 4.25% National Defense Bonds 1972, where such bonds are held by an individual and such individual should not be non-resident. Number 2, any interest which is payable on 4.25 National Defense Loan 1968 or 4.75% National Defense Loan 1972, where the interest is payable to an individual. Any interest which is payable on National Development Bonds. Any interest which is payable on 7-year National Saving Certificates. Any interest which is payable on dividend which is issued by any institute or by any authority or by any public sector company or any cooperative society which is defined or notified by central government. Any interest which is payable on 6 5%, gold bonds 9077, or 7% gold bonds 9080, where the bonds are held by an individual. Any interest which is payable on any security of the central government or a state government. Any interest which is payable on the security to LIC, GIC, subsidiary of GIC, or any other insurer. Any interest which is payable on any security which is issued by a company where such a security is in demonetized form, is that such security is should be in demat form. These are the some of the sections of TDS. Now we will discuss the other section of TDS in our next video, which is TDS part 2. Thank you.